Final Fantasy is one of the games that stapled and defined what is known as RPG games, setting the foundation for many other studios to follow. But in 1997, between 2001, Square would release 4 games that is considered to be the golden era of Final Fantasy. And in the year of 2000, a game that became a love letter to the previous titles would become one of the best RPGs of all time. The game takes a more traditional turn, nodding to the original Final Fantasy classics, a tone that is similar to 1 through 6. Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy, said many times in an interview that FF9 was his return to the fantasy roots of the series. After the success of Final Fantasy 7 and 8 moving heavily into the sci-fi modern themes, he wanted a classic feel to it. Medieval towns, crystals, and traditional music, a more fairy tale atmosphere, paying tribute to the series and capturing that pure Final Fantasy spirit that defined the franchise to what it is today. The game begins with a simple but powerful setup: a kingdom at peace, a princess longing for freedom, and a thief who's not quite what he seems. The story opens up with Zidane and him arriving in Alexandria under disguise in a performing play, but their real mission is to kidnap the princess. What makes this beginning so memorable is that the princess wants to be escaped. She wants to escape her sheltered life and willingly runs away with her would-be captors, setting off a chain of events that reveals political tension, hidden identities, and a much larger threat lurking behind the scenes. Final Fantasy IX has a blend of humor, mystery, and a fairy tale charm. The way each character crosses paths with their own goals, and how one attempted kidnapping becomes the spark for a journey that grows far beyond the borders of Alexandria. It's the moment where I realized this wasn't just nostalgia. It was the start of a story that felt alive. It invited me back into a world I once struggled to finish, now ready to experience it with my own eyes. An experience that felt both classic and refreshing. The ability system, where skills are learned through equipment, brought back a lot of memories of the job and relic systems back from Final Fantasy IV or even 6, yet added its own twist by making every piece of gear feel like a small story of growth. The ATB battles felt very familiar, almost like a hybrid type of feel, but with a cleaner, more fairy tale presentation that made each encounter feel handcrafted. I constantly found myself choosing between upgrading for better stats or holding on to gear long enough to master a essential ability. A tension that kept me even on the menu system for long periods of time just made this game a lot much more meaningful. But outside of combat, the world felt alive in a way that echoed the charm of Final Fantasy VI towns, but with far more personality thanks to active time events, which turned side moments into fully realized character scenes. One big thing I noticed about Final Fantasy VII and 8 was the junction system that allows huge flexibility, but in this game, Final Fantasy IX, it prioritizes a lot for clarity and focus. As I played Final Fantasy IX, I couldn't help but feel the spirit of Final Fantasy VI woven into nearly every part of my experience, yet reshaped into something more intimate and refined. Like FF6, it uses a lot of AP to teach abilities, but instead of espers giving everyone the same magic, FF9 ties growth directly to equipment, making each character progression feel more personal and grounded. The combat carries the same classic ATB flow as FF6, but more with a slower rhythm that gives every attack and animation weight, almost like a modern echo of the old SNES battles. FF9 also preserves the strong sense of character identity that FF6 introduced when it launched. Roles feel more clear, they feel more defined, never blurred by universal magic. White mage feels like a white mage, and a knight actually feels like a knight. An example in this case would be Steiner. One of my favorite moves from this game is actually Steiner's shock ability. I think it's so cool, and that thing does massive damage. I remember my first playthrough when I used that, especially against the boss Ozma. It really carried me through the whole fight. And honestly, there is so much more in this game that you can use, such as Freya's Dragon Crest, Zidane's Thief ability, so much more. The story wouldn't hit nearly as hard without the cast that carries it. And in this chapter, I reflect on how each character left a mark on my journey. To Vivi's quiet struggle with identity and his morality is one of the most emotionally honest arcs in the entire franchise. And watching him search for purpose made me think about what it means to truly live, as well as Steiner's transformation from being a rigid knight, blindly following orders, to someone who learns to trust his own judgment, brought nothing but humor and heart, and made every scene with him feel so earned. The princess learned to define her own voice, symbolized by the moment she cuts her own hair and steps into her own life, or even characters like Freya, carrying the weight of loss, of grief, of losing a loved one, or even losing a romantic loved one. These moments really what defined and shaped the franchise to what it is today. And moments like these added layers that stayed with me long after the battles ended. This chapter is about how FF9 isn't just an adventure going across kingdoms. It's a journey that shaped people's lives and helped find themselves, and how their vulnerabilities, their flaws, and their hopes connected with my own experiences as I played. No journey through Final Fantasy is without its challenges, and for me, the struggle became part of the story itself. I remember level 5 death one-shotting my whole party more times than I can even count, turning what should have been a routine dungeon crawl into a tense dance of survival. I got hopelessly lost in cities like Dali, Trino, and etc., wandering around the streets and secret alleyways only to stumble upon tiny moments of magic I hadn't even noticed before, or just useless spots wandering around helplessly. All the more confusion just made things more worth it. Grinding for abilities became a routine, sometimes even tedious at some points, but often more rewarding. As I carefully balanced learning skills with exploring the world and keeping my characters alive, with drenching myself with potions, or even high potions for that matter, and even deciding who to join my party, who would sit out, watching how each combination changed both battle strategies and story dynamics. These frustrations, as well as the small defeats and the long hours of trial, and error didn't just test my patience, it just made things even more sweatier. But nevertheless, the victories that were earned and the journey that came with it, and it's in these moments that FF9 stops being just more than a game, but becomes a mirror reflecting the human side of playing. The curiosity, the laughter, the endurance, the perseverance, and the satisfaction of overcoming the odds and not knowing what's ahead made this game truly a gem and truly special. What surprised me most was how these struggles slowly changed the way I approached the game. Instead of rushing forward, I noticed I began paying closer attention to my equipment, to my abilities, and everything that I had possession of, to the quiet warnings the game had been slowly giving me. The losses stopped feeling more like punishment and more like lessons, where the game asked me to slow down and respect its systems instead of trying to brute force my way through it. Getting lost no longer felt like wasted time. It began more like an invitation to explore, to let curiosity have its own way. Even grinding, normally I usually avoid that, but in this game, I actually enjoyed grinding. It kind of felt fun, like the sense of comfort, a steady rhythm where progress was earned one step at a time. And as my party grew stronger, as my equipment was stronger, so did my connection to them. Not just as units in battle, but as characters whose strengths and weaknesses I now know on a deeper level. In a way, Final Fantasy IX has taught me that struggle isn't the opposite of enjoyment. It's the reason the journey feels meaningful, because every mistake I made, every setback, or even perhaps slow victories become part of a story you carry as you move forward and progress in the game until the end. Final Fantasy IX didn't change me with grand gestures or overwhelming, spectacular moments. It changed me quietly, patiently, over time. What began as a return to a game I once left unfinished slowly became one of the most personal experiences I've ever had in a video game. FF9 doesn't rush you forward or demand your attention. It invites you to stay, to listen, but most importantly, to reflect. Through its characters, its world, and its moments of stillness, it reminded me that the growth doesn't always feel exciting in the moment, but it's happening all the same. The theme of identity, purpose, morality, it hits different now. From Vivi searching for meaning, to Dagger's courage that defines her own life, or even Zidane's compassion in the face of uncertainty stayed with me long after I put the controller down. Those weren't just the story beats, they were reflections of real human struggles, presented with honesty, with warmth. Final Fantasy IX showed me that strength isn't about being chosen or powerful. It's about kindness, perseverance, and choosing to keep moving forward even when the answers are not clear to you. I'll never forget Final Fantasy IX, not because of the nostalgia alone, but because it met me right where I was. From a 10-year-old kid to an adult. It reminded me that some stories are meant to be finished. When we first encounter them, they're always meant to be finished. They wait until we live long enough to truly understand them. And when the journey finally ends, it's always a bittersweet goodbye. Final Fantasy IX will always be more than just a game to me, as I'm sure it's more than a game to those of you watching. It will always be a part of your story as well as mine. But this is Final Fantasy IX. This is my experience with the game.